Good morning, everyone, and it's 11:12, and you're on the platform with Tina Nixon. And this morning, we finally managed to get him after me having a number that you must have had when you're a kid, I think, Derek. We have Derek Fox, who's back in Auckland after being up in Samoa. Good morning, Derek.
Good morning.
I don't know why that happens, but people seem to have a bit of a pause before I say anything, there's something on the desk that I haven't quite got right, I think, but I'm learning. It's really good to hear from you, and you have been up in Samoa, I understand.
Yes, got back there from there in the early hours of this morning. It's terrible time for a flight, but anyway, back here safe and sound.
And so what were you doing up in Samoa? Was it a work visit or just a pleasure visit?
Well, it was a bit of a weird one in that last year sometime I was at a charity ball for the Pacifica Medical Association in Wellington, and amongst there was a fundraiser for their organisation, and they had on offer a stay at a resort in Samoa where the resort is named after a movie that was made in the bay and in the village where this resort is located on the west coast of the main island of Upolu. And the movie was called Return to Paradise with Gary Cooper as the star and a woman whose name escapes me right now was his co-star. But after the movie was made, some people in the village got together and they ended up building a resort, and it's the last of the Samoan-owned resorts, wholly owned resorts, big resorts in Samoa.
Oh, so who owns most of the resorts? Are they all international chains?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know
international chains, and with some. I guess there must be some landowners and others involved too, but mainly national chains. International chains.
Right. And in terms of Samoa, I understand there's some issues, not just in Samoa, but probably across the Pacific, around we're poaching workers to come here to our tourism industry. It obviously needs workers, but that's having an effect on the tourism up in those areas?
Yes, it is. It's having an effect. I mean, this place where we stayed, they had 19... restaurant staff, and they lost 10 of them, I think, to New Zealand. But they didn't all go. They didn't all go to work in. They haven't come down here to work in restaurants and other places. They've just come to work because I guess the wages are better. And the person who was in charge of running their food side, he's ended up picking fruit in Tauranga or somewhere, and so, that RSC scheme, it was initially designed that they wouldn't be chasing the higher skilled workers, that it was more something that was available for less skilled workers from the Pacific to come down.
Yeah.
And the same thing's happening in Rarotonga, where another interesting sidebar to that is that most of the people that are being poached from Rarotonga, not poached, offered employment, and they've taken it. They're Filipinos, and they've been given a fast track in being able to come in from Rarotonga into New Zealand.
Oh, so they're coming from the Philippines into the Cooks and then to New Zealand?
Well, they come to the Cooks to work, and then these jobs are offered. In 1 year there, just 1 year, the Cooks lost 2,000 people. Now, when you've got an island or when you've got a place that's only got about 10,000 people, losing 2,000 is a heck of a lot of people.
Wow, that's extreme. So does it have the same impact as it has here? Like I missed you a couple of weeks ago, and I know you're in Wellington for a good lunch, which I always enjoy with you. But the services here in the restaurants is... The people are really, really good, but they're just absolutely running to service the clients at the tables, just because there's just not enough people in the restaurants here now, even obviously with them getting some from the Pacific Islands. So how does it impact on service in the Pacific Island tourism trade?
and it was exactly the same thing. There's a very fine restaurant in Apia, which you need to go to, Tina, when you go there. It's called Paddles.
Yeah.
And it's run by an Italian guy. Excellent food.
That's so funny. Italian restaurant in the Pacific run by an Italian, yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not an Italian restaurant. It serves a lot of really nice Pacific food, but he's struggling for staff, but somehow he's holding it together because, boy, they were flat out, but they got through it, and we went there a couple of times.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. And I don't see an easy solution. I mean, it is a problem globally as well.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you'd have thought that there'd been some better thinking around the Filipino route, which is I think is quite fascinating.
They're hard work. They're really hard workers. The Filipinos are. In the Cook Islands, you've got just about any nationality you can think of there. It's represented there, albeit, there's one person there from Chechnya, so there's only one Chechen there, but there's a Chechen there. There are people there. There's a guy there who's from Ukraine, and so you've got people like that. But if you look at the numbers there, that of course the highest number of people in the Cook Islands are Cook Islanders.
Yeah.
The next highest are Fijian. And the next highest after that are expat Kiwis, and then the next highest after that are Filipinos. And the Filipinos were on course to be bumping the Fijians out of second place rather, and their numbers have dropped since a whole mob of them moved to New Zealand.
Right. Oh, fascinating. And I don't see any easy solutions to it, to be frank. Our old friend Mr. Thorpe, who used to be a bit tough on restaurant staff, he'd bloody struggle at the moment with some of the level of service. For those who are listening who may know John Thorpe, or did know John Thorpe, he was a larger-than-life character who was very high profile on Wellington's long lunch scene, which used to be quite prolific in the mid-2000s, and of which Derek and I have been party to on a number of occasions. But the service then in those days was always pretty top-notch, and you certainly had a number of waiters in a restaurant, but I've seen people who own restaurants out with their pennies on lately, trying to cope with the level of service that is required for a good restaurant.
Yeah, well, I think the best solution, if Thorpe was still here, the best solution with him would be to give him a hose.
Yeah, he could mainline wine like no one else could.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he lasted I think he was 72 when he died, wasn't he? I was surprised he'd lasted as long as he did. He was definitely one of Wellington's more colourful characters anyway. Hey, now I tell you, I understand there's also a new law in the Cook Islands around same-sex marriage. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's not about same-sex marriage, but it's up until this law was passed last week. It was illegal for homosexuality was illegal.
Oh, really?
And
in the
men
Pacific
having
Islands? Wow.
Yeah, and men having sex with sex, it was against the law. And there's a very strong, as you know, religious sector in the Cooks, and and they were still vehemently opposed to decriminalising it. It's been decriminalised in a raft of legislation, almost like an omnibus type legislation, which also provides greater protection and care for people who are the victims of illegal sexuality, and so that law was passed last week. Wasn't an easy passage. I understand the Prime Minister, who was very much in favour of it, and said that when he was campaigning for the last election, that his government would change it, and he's done that. But apparently, it wasn't easy in the caucus.
Yeah. But there is a thing was it the Pacific Island culture? Tell me whether I'm wrong. If it's not in the Cooks or the Whawhainis, So,
Yep.
and they're
And
quite
it's still very
overt.
no, yes, it's still very strong.
Yeah.
And there is a community in they call them Whawhawhine in Samoa. There's another name in the Cooks, but they also and it's acknowledged, and there are people there. There are quite senior people in the government who are transsexual, and so, but and the politicians who didn't want to change the law would say, well, they can just do what they do now. You don't have to change the law. But that's not the point.
No, it's not the point. No.
It's not the point.
You shouldn't be a criminal because of your sexuality. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, yes.
And I hear too that there is an increase in regional sport in the Pacific, and so you're seeing such a growth in it. Can you elaborate on that a wee bit?
Well, I'm not sure that it's necessarily an increase, but it's just suddenly come to my attention just how often there are teams from like the Cooks, where, as you know, I spend a lot of time, where they're off playing in some tournament in New Zealand or in the Solomons or in Fiji or whatever, and that's soccer. And in the latest case, there's a tennis tournament taking place in Samoa, where there are Cook Island kids. It's an under-12 Pacific-wide tennis tournament, and they're operating on. They need 30 courts to be able to operate. Well, they don't have 30 courts in Samoa. So I don't know whether they're playing at night or what, but they where we went and sat in on it was our son. Tinido is not a bad tennis player, but he was off doing other sports and didn't really apply himself to the tennis regime, which led to some of his good mates that he plays tennis with. And they're in Samoa at the moment. And I was really impressed by the standard of it. I was staggered, actually.
Yeah.
And
good to hear.
Yeah, it was really good. And there was going to be a tough... I haven't caught up with what happened yesterday, but there was a couple of games that the Tahitians were acknowledged as being the top tennis players in that sector in the region. But the Cooks was challenging them and had beaten their number one guy, and our number two had lost to their number two. So there was going to be a doubles tournament that was going to sort out who was going to win, but I haven't heard.
Oh, really good. Oh, nice to hear. Hey, when's the last time you were back up the East Coast?
I was there during the cyclone and there after the cyclone. So, I have been there in that time, and I'm going back again tomorrow. So I'll be there for a few days.
We talked to some of the people down in Hawke's Bay yesterday, namely Paul Painter, who has Yummy Apples, Yummy Foods, I think it's called, one of the bigger businesses in Hawke's Bay.
Yes.
And they have also put out an announcement or a press statement yesterday, an open letter to the government, basically saying, hey, we don't know what the hell's going on anymore. And we need you to do some stuff, and so it's almost sad in a way. It's got a sort of a despair tone to it, and I did see on, I think it's TV1 today too, where there is calls from the East Coast from people who are just saying this is not happening fast enough, and everyone's worried because we're moving into winter. And I just wondered what you're hearing out of Wairoa and up there around how people are coping and what are their big concerns.
I haven't heard anything, to be straight, and I guess over the next couple of days I will, because I'm planning to go into Wairoa, which is one of the worst affected areas. Yeah. And I've got mates who live there and mates who've been trying to help out there. So I'll know a little bit more by the end of the weekend. But I've seen, I haven't seen the comments from Hawke's Bay, but I've seen from up the coast where they, and up the coast they've taken that attitude, which is, well, we'll just do it ourselves. If no one will do it, we'll do something ourselves. And hence them putting in that bypass road. And there's talk of another bypass road that they're working on. So, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Hawke's Bay stuff is that pipeline of insurance, and EQC is one of the issues. They certainly need some access to recovery around infrastructure, so that they can get their stuff to the market, and the decision regarding land use as well. So those are sort of critical issues for them as well. And of course, I don't think it's too long before HECIA's reports out either on the forestry slash.
The forestry slash, in quotations either side of it, forestry slash, it's not just forestry slash. If you alter the land use by changing the topography of the land, you're going to get ramifications. It happened when they cleared the land for farming.
Yeah.
For normal pastoral farming, and it's happening because they've been clearing land and planting it in forestry.
In fact, the previous big flood in the Esk Valley was exactly that. It was the clearing of the farmland, and it came through with a great rate of knots and bowled them all over and killed a shitload of people.
You see, so we're calling it's a slash problem now, but the reality is, as a young reporter, I covered the planting of the very first lot of pine trees on the East Coast. It was up a place called the Wairoa Mayor Derek.
I didn't think you were that old, Derek.
And yeah, no, I am. And an uncle of mine who had served in the Māori battalion was one of the men who was up there working. And I watched them, and I took film. It was film in those days, black and white film, of them planting the trees. Those trees have long since matured and been cut down, and there's some replanting going on. But even in the more recent ones, the ones that 28 years ago, people planted trees because they were advised to. They said, look, this is a way of saving the coast. It's the next big thing for the coast. And the coast has had a lot of big things. Mm-hmm. I milked cows as a kid, and that was the big thing for the coast. We milked cows. I milked cows for 10 years as a school kid. Yep. And then it was no longer economic, so that stopped. Then they planted crops, planted maize. They've been planting peas, but all of them have come and gone. Rob Muldoon went up and opened up a huge vineyard at a place called Tiki Tiki. Right. Never lasted. Huh. It was the wrong grapes, the wrong place, and all of these things. So that's what the issues are, I think, is what you're going to do and how you do it. And but I have an idea, and of course nobody's going to listen to my idea. But
they are on the platform. You've probably got 30 or 40,000 people listening to you right now. So go.
I actually think if I were in the government, I would say, you know what? 100-odd years ago, when we started breaking in this country, we had a big development plan, and that's when we built railroads and roads and other things. I think it's time to do another one of those, but this time to do it properly. New Zealanders believe you can make anything with number 8 wire.
No.
Well, we've been caught out. You can't. Our roads are number 8 wire roads, and they're not working. Our power systems are number 8 wire, and they're not working. Our connectivity, and funnily enough, the latest thing off the rank, connectivity, that was one of the biggest complaints with Cyclone Gabrielle, because people suddenly being used to picking up a device that you can fit into your pocket and calling someone across the other side of the world suddenly couldn't do it. Yeah,
and no backup generators at any of the towers, says Josh. That is right.
No backup generators, I was asked, and I had to sit in on a call with some group saying, what can we do next for communications up the coast?
Starling.
Well, I said, you need to have a bulletproof solution.
Yep.
Because, see, with communities up the coast, first of all, there's no bank. There's no bank there, so you can't go to the bank and draw some money out.
My goodness.
You have to, and there's no checkbook.
So everyone will be operating on cash.
You're operating on cash, and of course, if you're operating on a lot of cash, you must have some cash crop somewhere. That obviously,
exactly. Yep.
But this is not a joke. I heard someone saying to me, "I've got to go and see. I've got to go down and see someone and do something." He said, well, I haven't got enough money. He said, I might have to go and take a loan from the mongrel mob.
Wow. So they're providing the cash because they're dealing in cash. It's crazy. Wow.
Well, when the power goes out,
Yep.
So does the connectivity. So do the FPOS machines.
Yep.
So do the petrol pumps. So does everything else.
It's an interesting thing because the one I've noticed this, we've got Starling. We were one of the first to get onto Starling, but one of the first places in New Zealand to try out Starling and do the beta testing was Stewart Island, and their community board chair. No, he was actually the Southern District Council rep, Bruce Ford. And Fordy's run the pub down there, or did run the pub for a number of years, and he was, he's in his late 60s, probably early 70s, and he was excited about 18 months, 2 years ago when he was telling me how he was trying out this new thing, and he said it was just amazing because they had pretty shit connection over there. On the Muttonbird Islands, everyone's got Starlink. So here's this group of people who are really used to living in most remote environs probably of New Zealand right at the moment. And they're all, not all of them, but there's a number of Starlink connections on the islands because they can use solar. They've got generators anyway, and some of them have got wind, and they're all on Starlink. In fact, some of them are listening to the project, the platform right now on Starlink, and I think that's one of the solutions. And there are other providers coming into the market now with Starlink. I said 3 years ago to our district plan people and our economic development people, I don't know why we're worrying about all this bloody copper and crap. It's going to be upstairs, up in the sky. That's going to be the solution. Boom. What happened? And Starlink has now become one of the saviours of rural areas, but it certainly wasn't figuring in our emergency management system. And I think
Gabriel's changed that. Cyclone Gabby's changed that.
Yeah, I think so. And
the Ngāti Pro Runanga ended up purchasing a whole lot of Starlinks and putting them in down the coast,
Yeah.
And that's how people got connectivity. I mean, and a Starlink was put in at Mahia, and I was there, and we'd had no connectivity for a while, and some guy turned up in my place on crutches. And he's not younger than me, but he was on crutches. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I've got to take a picture of you." I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, I got to post it. I've got Starlink," and I put a message out saying, "Hey, if there's anyone you haven't heard from, you want me to get in touch." So naturally, Jaywan had been nagging the hell out of him, and he came and took a photo and then posted it. He said, "So I can tell them you're okay."
Foxy's alive.
but he said, "I had 199 people wanting to know if you were okay." But I reckon it wasn't true. It was just somebody hitting the resend button or something. But anyway, so they did put up a Starlink at the hub where they had the people could go and catch up and get some food and whatnot from out at Mahia. And I went there, and there would have been 100 people sitting around chatting or texting their relatives. And you know what was the funniest thing of all? One of the questions I heard over and over again, "Is my cat all right, and are you feeding it?"
Yeah, well,
People
pets are a big thing.
Pets.
Yeah, pets are a real big thing, and we've been talking about cats this morning, but trying to get rid of them, not actually feed them, but that's another whole story of feral cats. And that is it. And people, especially people who are on their own and older, pets are hugely important to them. They love them, and take something away that you love, and it is a huge thing. So I totally get that.
There's the next best business opportunity.
Yeah. Yep.
Getting devices that your cat can use, and you can call them and they can call you. I'll leave you to it.
Yeah. Hey, look, Derek, it's been great talking to you, and thanks very much for giving up your time. And I might even talk to you on Monday once you've been up there and just get a feel for how things are at post Gabriel, and in that period where everyone wants to know what's happening next and nobody does, and see whether that is a true reflection of what's happening up in Wairoa and around that area as well.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Derek.